Hi there, I'm Kevin Renton and welcome to QuickFire with Volt. This is where we get higher ed marketers and put them in the hot seat and ask them 20 rapid questions to find out what makes them tick, what makes them successful, and what their goals are for the future. In the crossfire today, we have Jamie Ceman, Vice President of Strategic Marketing and Communications from Chapman University. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. And to kick off, give us your elevator pitch. What do you do at Chapman University?
As you said, I'm the Vice President of Strategic Marketing and Communications. So that role oversees marketing communications for enrollment marketing, admissions, clearly fundraising, marketing, all the things that we do for national awareness, brand, reputation management, public relations, media relations, really the gamut of marketing communications for Chapman. Chapman's a mid-sized private university in Southern California, and we really just got into the national rankings about 5 years ago. So a big focus of ours is brand awareness and building national reputation.
How big's your team there?
35 people.
Whoa! So you got your hands full.
Yeah, they're a great team though.
Okay, I wanted to work in higher education because
I think like most people in higher ed marketing, we found this by accident. I didn't plan by any means to end up in higher ed marketing, but a position opened up at where I did my undergrad, and it just seemed fun at the time. And so I interviewed, and I remember still just walking to the interview thinking, oh my God, can I really just work at a campus and be in college all day, every day? And turns out you can. So here I am.
It's one of the really interesting things that, a lot of the people that we've spoken to in this series, it's the energy that you get from being on campus, and you don't forget it once you've been to university. And you're right, to actually go back and have that as your day-to-day is fantastic.
It is. It's so fun. And having meetings about homecoming and mascots. And I still remember my first meeting with a faculty, and she, it was an English faculty who made some obscure Great Gatsby reference. I'm like, it's just so fun being here.
The marketing tool I can't live without is...
It's sort of nerdy, but data. I'm a complete data nerd. And actually just this week, we had a meeting about more dashboards, and I just get giddy by it. So data informs everything I do and everything my department does. And so it's just, couldn't live without that.
How do you get your data? On which dashboards do you use?
Well, it depends. We have a big digital presence with side vendors, so we get tons and tons of data from that. We have all kinds of different tools. Our PR team uses Cision, our social media team uses Sprout Social. So it all just depends. We just have tons of it. So what we're trying to do now is build a more aggregated dashboard, a data warehouse, and a dashboard that'll kind of give us the 30,000 foot on all of it, because now it's all these different places. So that's what made me super nerd out this week, was how do we build a data warehouse?
Okay. My biggest professional mistake was
doing B2C retail marketing in the recession. I jumped to a e-commerce retailer at the start of the recession, and I can tell you it was the stupidest mistake I've ever made. The most stressful time of my life. I had more stress dreams about not being able to find my locker and missing my final exam through that 2 years that I was in retail marketing than I've ever had in my life. So that was absolutely my biggest mistake.
Was there any key takeaways though from what you learned in B2C marketing that then helped you in higher ed marketing?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And, we like to pretend that higher ed is sort of special, but it's consumer marketing to a degree. And so what was great about retail marketing during the recession is that we got super efficient and effective about making the most out of everything we could, because you just had to. And so I just learned so much and worked with incredibly smart people. And a lot of that I could apply to higher ed marketing. Especially, I learned a lot about email marketing at the time. That's really where I got the basis of that skill set. And so, of course, I've been able to apply a lot of that in higher ed.
Yeah, and maybe it helped that love of data as well.
It might be where it came from, because it was so data driven when we were there. And now it's like, I don't know how you do marketing without that.
When I'm not working, I
have a 16-year-old who plays soccer, and she wants to, do D1. So my whole external life is soccer tournaments, soccer practices, soccer games, soccer.
I start my day at.
About 6 a.m., nothing too extreme, but you wake up, I grab my phone and I clear out whatever happened overnight and go on from there. So about 6 a.m.
The secret to a student succeeding at my school is.
The thing about Chapman is we talk about the Chapman experience, and there's a certain level, and I think, in need of a student to be really engaged. And it's kind of probably hard to kind of keep to yourself on a campus like this. It's got this, sort of family feel to it. So I think a level of engagement is probably necessary to really thrive here.
I admire the marketing at.
Well, Amy Hook from Boston University will be so happy I said this and I tell her every time, Boston University, I have watched their marketing for just years and years. And I think that they were one of the first campuses who did a really excellent job of brand consistency, even down to the school and college level. And so I tell her this, I gush over her whenever I see her. So Boston University.
What are some of the challenges with brand consistency that you've seen? Like, what are some of that make it hard?
The baseline understanding for people across campus that they're not competing with each other, they're competing externally. And so that brand consistency may feel boring, but it's actually a necessity. The business school doesn't have to differentiate itself from film school. The consistency is obviously what's going to build brand awareness externally. So I think there's just the sort of fundamental understanding of what brand marketing is. Then there's also and I say this to my team all the time, we get bored with it too. And I think our own discipline in maintaining brand consistency is super critical, and it's easy to get bored with it and start to stray ourselves.
The getting bored with the brand things, it's you think it because you're living it and you're working in it, but the external market, like obviously being in Philly, Temple had this brand slogan made in Temple, and the city loved it, or it was Temple made, and the city loved it, and the alum loved it, and of course they changed it, and every year there's the clamor of like, hey, can we just bring it back like Temple made?
Right? Why did you do it? I mean, and that's exactly what happens. It just, you start to water it down yourself because we're creative people by nature, and so we just keep pushing the boundaries.
The biggest challenge facing higher education marketers are,
in general, having the resources to do the work that we need to do. And I think being even efficient with the resources that you have. It's easy to say that I don't have enough people, I don't have enough money, but I think that it's harder for us to look at, am I doing the right things with the resources that I have? And I think that's the first thing people need to be looking at, instead of creating the reasons why I can't do these things. What can I be doing differently so that I can get these things done? I think is something I've long seen, I think, in the industry of especially because I came from public higher ed, and I really did not have the resources needed to really do what we needed to do. And so how do you get super pragmatic about what do we do with our limited resources as compared to what we don't?
My favorite social media channel is, and why?
I mean, personally, it's LinkedIn. I'm sort of a LinkedIn junkie. I think it's great for networking. I think it's great for education. And even for our institutional marketing, it's really good for rank and reputation work that we do. My social media team would not say LinkedIn is their favorite channel, but it's fine.
My biggest professional achievement is?
Just this past year, it was sort of a big career milestone that my internal team did a brand refresh. I've historically done that with an agency, and it was the first time I've actually been able to run one completely in-house, and to have the team to be able to do it, to have the level of creativity that we needed to do it, and then the expertise to not just build it but roll it out. That was an absolute career milestone for me this past year.
Yeah, it's fantastic and and you're right. I almost think that brand refreshes, sometimes it's about the people. And if you can bring the people along in that journey and do it in-house, the amplification, the activation of it actually is then easier or sometimes more impactful.
Well, it feels so much more authentic, because instead of trying to have an external agency understand who we are, we understand who we are. And now to be able to have the talent to be able to articulate it's the absolute strongest brand I've ever worked on. And it's being so well received. And people look at it now and they're like, yep, that's absolutely Chapman. So it was a pretty incredible year.
What's working in higher ed right now?
I think in a broad sense, I think that schools are becoming more nimble and understanding, what they need to do to respond to external forces. I think that, there's better conversations about, programs and curriculum development and certainly how we're using marketing to advance the institution. I think that that's going relatively well now. And again, the external forces are kind of making that happen, but I think that higher ed's getting a little bit better about responding to it.
And the opposite, what's not working in higher ed right now?
We all know there's this growing narrative about the value of higher ed. And I think that there's so many conversations amongst higher ed professionals about how to tackle that. And so many of the solutions seem to be, we talk to each other about the things that we know are great about higher ed. I don't think that we've found a really effective way to change the minds of the people who don't have the confidence in us. So I do think there's a lot of work to do for our industry to really show our value.
The future of higher education will be?
It's a big philosophical question because there's so much happening, especially with enrollment declines that are really going to start to hit in the next few years. And schools are starting to shut down who haven't been able to sort of weather it up to this point, and it's only going to get worse. I think that, there's a lot of conversation about the humanities and are we, the death of the humanities, and we're watching it play out in different schools. We're cutting these programs. I think that for me, it's not that are we cutting the humanities, but should institutions be looking at whether or not they need to be all things for all people? And maybe that institutions might be able to survive if they learn how to specialize a little bit more. That maybe I don't go to this particular school because they don't have the English major anymore or philosophy major anymore, but this school over here has an amazing philosophy department. Let them succeed in that, and we'll succeed in what we can. I think the level of specialization is going to have to start to happen if some of these campuses want to weather this.
A key to my success has been?
I've always been sort of maybe, and this sounds maybe arrogant, and I don't mean it to be, like strategic to a fault. I think it's really hard. I struggle with anyone who wants to do anything that they can't anchor it to some sort of a strategy. I think it's helped me, stop chasing after shiny objects. I think it's allowed me to be pretty methodical in how I lead this department, for us to stay really focused on here's our priorities, here's what we're going to do to accomplish them. If you want to do something, what priority does it anchor to? Otherwise, it's just not worth our resources.
Wait, what part of your career did the penny drop that chasing shiny objects wasn't going to work? Because it happened, you can't help it, I think, at some point in your career where, whether it's, whether it's virtual reality or whether it's like, hey, well, this would be a great marketing tool, or augmented reality, or whatever, or campus tours online, or all the things where it's like the shiny objects always appear.
I know, and I think there was a point at which that started to accelerate, and we all started chasing them. And at some point, you just realized, I chased this thing, this new social media platform, name the one that's died since, and we put resources into it and it didn't go anywhere. And so I think just organically over time, everybody kind of started to realize this needs to be a little more established before I put real time and energy into it and putting my focus into the real things that we do. A couple of years ago, actually, it's probably been almost 5 years ago, I started using a maturity model, and that actually came out of Indiana University, and I saw it and grabbed it and adapted it to Chapman. And what it's allowed me to do is, kind of create a way for me to do, here's the priorities of my department. Here's where we kind of are. Are we transactional? Are we accelerating, all the way up to, are we a high performance team in brand management and risk management and audience journeys? And so kind of defining what it is that what our core function is and how are we doing in it? How advanced are we in it? And that's also allowed us to sort of become the check mark for, does this advance brand management? Yes or no? Does this advance? What is this tool going to do for us? And if it can't align to something that we're trying to do, then it's not something we should be focusing in on yet.
Yeah. You mentioned something there that I'm always really intrigued about, high performance teams. Like, what does that mean to you, or what does that feel like when you think, no, my team is high performing?
From a marketing perspective is what we're measuring. So is the content we're putting out relevant and timely? Is it meeting our audiences where they are? Is it personalized? Is it are we adapting based on data? But and is the team even equipped to do that? And so it's sort of become the North Star for us of here's what we think high performance is. And so now we're able to actually build professional development plans around how to get there and sort of do gap analysis on the strategic things that we're doing to make sure that we're doing this because it's going to move us towards that. And so then it becomes super obvious, like if we're going to have personalized content, well, we need a CMS for that. We need marketing automation for that. We need CRM, So then the solutions start to become easy when you know where it is you're going.
And I totally agree with you. Yeah, you brought it back to data, because as soon as you then bring it back to data, and then you can have your leveling guides, what performance means. But you've got to create that culture where people don't get frightened by the data to begin with, like, oh, I'm not performing. Or, oh, it's like, no, that's okay. But then we can build the plans up there because it's then easiest to recognize, and we can get there. We can get that journey.
That's exactly right.
One thing I've learned about managing my team is
that it's all about culture. In some ways, I'll say I learned it the hard way that, to your very point, people need to feel like they're in a safe and supportive environment. They need to not feel like if I didn't hit the mark on this one, that now I'm in trouble. Everybody needs to feel like they're in a safe and supportive environment. Once they feel comfortable and safe, then they can really, truly be innovative. It's taken me a while to get there, but now that's my biggest focus is culture.
The hardest part of my job is
probably just balancing all of the things. There's so much that marketing has to be and should be involved in, and how do we even balance and prioritize that? That's always the daily challenge. We have so many requests coming in. We have so many things that we ourselves want to do, even with the size team that we have. That we are above capacity. So managing that is always the hardest part.
Somebody that was a marketer that wasn't in higher ed and wanted to get into higher ed, how would you advise them to get into the industry?
It's funny. I was obviously, as I said, I was in corporate marketing. I sort of accidentally got into it because the jobs opened up. I think it's less of, well, I think you have to really be able to sell the parallels between what corporate marketing can do to higher ed. I think it's really easy to assume that you can't make that transition. And when you look at people's resumes, I think it's hard to show the alignment. So I think if you're trying to get into higher ed, I think you need to be able to demonstrate that you understand higher ed enough to be able to make the comparison of what your experience is. But once you're there, then you do actually have to understand how different the culture is and how because if you want to stay there, you have to learn culture of higher ed, and it's very different than corporate marketing. It's much more about buy-in and consensus than it is in corporate, where you can just say do this and don't do that. So it's a very different culture that takes people a long time to adjust to.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, certainly like going to AMA, there's obviously been a slight talent drain from the industry, and we as an industry need to get some talent people in, mixed with the talent that's already there. And I think that people from outside the industry do have strengths and knowledge that would actually add value, but then you've got to take the time to learn the culture and how the higher ed industry works.
For sure. You need a lot of diplomacy to get things through in higher ed. And that's a little bit harder if you've been in corporate for a long time.
Great. Thanks for your time, Jamie.
Oh, thank you so much.
All the question. We survived.
Thank you.
Not at all.